Good evening. This is the day the Lord has made. We want to welcome you to our special edition of our Wednesday night Bible teaching with Pastor H. Levi McClendon III, your senior pastor of Mount Zion All Nations Bible Church. Please feel free to share today's broadcast with as many people as you know. Also, feel free to comment if you get encouraged, blessed, or stirred up as you hear the Word of God. And use the emojis at any time to get our online activity to be heard throughout our time. If you're watching YouTube Live, display us on your smart TV for your entire family to watch. But now, let's get into this power-packed message.
God bless you, my brothers and sisters. It's good to see you again this week as we gather together for our time of Bible study. As we gather tonight, we are in the midst of a trying time in our country. We are right now facing a trifecta of tribulation and trouble that we're trying to navigate our way through. We're dealing with both this pandemic of the coronavirus that is still plaguing our country and our people in particular. We're dealing with massive unemployment, and people are economically unstable, wondering what is going to happen with their jobs, how we're going to pay our bills. And thirdly, as a part of this trifecta, is the ugly, consistent presence of racism in this country, in this nation, that has been ignored and not dealt with effectively and authentically in this country. I have agonized over what has happened. I have seen all of the videos of the shootings and the deaths and the reactions, both positive and negative, in our nation. And I have listened to the voices, both voices of vitriol and victory that are resounding. Right now, we just have a cacophony of voices and noise, and I have purposely sought not to address this issue too quickly because I didn't want to address it from the context of my anger or my frustration. I wanted to hear what others were saying, and I wanted to be prayerful myself. But I felt an obligation to speak, and I feel an obligation to speak to you, the members of Mount Zion All Nations Bible Church. I know that there are others who are listening, but as your shepherd and your pastor, those of you who allow me to be your shepherd and your pastor, I want to speak to you because these are critical and crucial times, and we must be very careful how we respond and be careful that we don't react. Those of you know that normally, under normal conditions on our Wednesday evening Bible study, I give time for questions and try to address or deal with the current topics of the day, should there be topics or events that kind of commandeer the collective attention of our country. And I feel that this is one time. And so I want to talk to you. I have been inundated with calls from other pastors, from my white brothers and sisters. I've appeared on and continue to appear on a number of Zoom conferences, webinars, and what have you, given how we have to communicate in this pandemic. And I felt that in adding my conversation or joining the conversation of the public, that as your pastor, I needed to just share some things with you. I want to share my heart because we're at a crisis here. And it is important, it is extremely important that we identify ourselves first as believers, not white, black, red, yellow, Republican, or Democrat. That is the essential problem in this country. That those who are supposed and claim to be Christians have not practiced the Christian ethic in this country. So we're at a critical time. We're at a crisis. The unnecessary, needless, heinous death of George Floyd, outside of the tragedy of it being a loss of human life, a loss of a human soul, it is also tragic that this name now must be added to a collection of names, many of whom we do not know because they have lingered in anonymity because of cover-ups all through our history. George Floyd's name is added to the names of Trayvon Martin and Sandra Bland and Ahmaud Arbery and Philando Castile and Breonna Taylor and Eric Garner and Tamir Rice. But let's not forget that among that cloud of witnesses to the atrocities of this country, we also add the name of Emmett Till. We add the names of four little girls who were blown up, whose lives were taken in the 16th Baptist Church in Birmingham. And that wasn't last week, last month, or last year. So those of you who I'm talking to, we know in the African American community, we know that this is not new. As a matter of fact, I've been asked several times, what do you want to say? I've even been asked in an audacious manner, what is it that we want? If I don't get any further, let me answer the what we want question very quickly. And that is, to sum it up, we want America to take its knee off of the collective neck of Black America and people of color. We are horrified at seeing this policeman who is supposed to represent law enforcement and our government that is supposed to protect us. We're horrified at seeing the video and the photographs of a knee on the neck of the late George Floyd and knees in his back. But I want to suggest to you that the knees in the back and the knees in the neck are just a change of position, that we've lived in this country 400 years with feet on our necks and feet on our backs. Any gains of civil rights have been trampled under the foot of those who, under the guise of making America great again, use that as code language to return to a time when people of color were not even considered, their voices were not heard. And even as I say that, I ask myself the question, what has changed? Again, I've been asked several times, what do you want and what do you have to say? And I want to really say to you, and I hope that some of my young people are listening. I think that this is a time when we don't have to say anything else. We've been speaking for 400 years. We've been crying for 400 years. Voices have gone into the atmosphere, prophetic utterances, challenging and charging this nation to live up to its creed. And yet we have been disappointed time upon time. A book was written called Why Do Black Men Holler? And the answer, to sum it up, was that we holler because we are not heard when we are talking and speaking. I want to suggest that Black America has become hoarse from saying the same thing over and over. And if change is going to come now, it's going to have to be the result not of voices speaking, but of action being taken. And we can't take that action. We don't have the power. We don't have the leverage collectively. The onus is upon white America. It is upon our white brothers and sisters, those of goodwill, those who believe the gospel message, but also know that it must be practiced as well as preached. So I just want to come and speak to you tonight, and I want to say to you to not be thrown, do not fall into frustration, exacerbation, but don't quit, don't feel like giving up. These are the responses, and they're the natural responses of a people who are tired, of saying the same thing, people who are tired of having their voices hushed, silenced, if not silenced by the loudness of other voices speaking in antipathy, but silenced by bullets, silenced by lynching, silenced by murder. Church, we still have to be the church. We still have to be believers. And we still have to live with that hope and that understanding that only the gospel of Jesus Christ can bring a solution to this situation. Not the gospel preached, but the gospel practiced. Be doers of the word and not simply hearers only. There is a truth that I want to share with you. And that truth is that we are now again hearing pleas and cries. These pleas and cries that are coming from different voices around this country and even around the world are pleas and cries for equality. They are pleas and cries that America live up to its own creed and its own constitution. But that brings up an interesting point, and that is, I don't believe, based upon my understanding of history and the response of persons who accept Jesus Christ and are led by the Spirit of God, I don't believe that this country ever from its inception intended for Black Americans, for people of color, to be a part of the fabric of this nation. The history books, and I was educated in the schools of this country, And in the history books of this country, you taught us that the first slaves appeared in this country in 1619 in Jamestown. We read that and we answered it. But it's not true. Slavery has been a part of this country. The subjugation of people of color has been a part of the framework and foundation of this country even before this country became a country. History shows us as far back as really 1490s, and when Columbus supposedly discovered a continent where people already were. There are records in history that there were slaves on those Spanish ships. In 1562, slaves were recorded as setting foot on the shores of this country. If we take those dates, then we're saying that we have been subjugated for not 400 years, but for more than 500 years. And I think it is important that we put this conflict in context, that we see the reality of our existence. Because if we're going to deal with something, we must first acknowledge that it exists. 1619. First people come to America, pilgrims. There are slaves with them. In that period of time, we were used to build this country. This country's economic system exists on the backs of Black people and of Native Americans, of Latinos. This country was built, let's not forget, the first people to come to this country were immigrants from England. In this time when this country takes such a horrible stand on immigration, this country was built on immigration, but it was built on immigration and subjugation. We were subjugated. Those who started this country knew inherently that we were not inferior because of the color of our skin, but they had to develop an ideology and a philosophy that would subjugate us so that they could exonerate themselves from building this country and from benefiting from slavery. So they developed an economic system. They developed a theological system that said we were less. I don't want to give a detailed lesson of history, but we've got to look at history to see where we are. This country made an effort to become independent. The 18th century in 1700s, and 1776, Declaration of Independence, succeeded by the Constitution. The architect of the Declaration of Independence, the architect of the Constitution of this country, said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Self-evident means there is no need to prove them. There is no need to show that these are self-evident. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And we could even discuss the hypocrisy in that. All men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Listen to this. These are self-evident truths. that all men are created equal. And as Thomas Jefferson was penning those words, let's not forget he was a slaveholder. The first president of the United States of America, George Washington, was a slaveholder. I'm a student of religion. I'm a student of theology. I studied it. One of the things that we were taught in school and in seminary, one of the things that we were taught when it came to interpreting the Bible and the precepts of interpretation of the Bible were thrust upon religion by the secular world. And basically what happened was the secular world said, you must use the same principles that we use in interpreting secular texts to interpret the Bible. And so it's called higher criticism and lower criticism. And without getting into all of that, let me just say this. One of the principles is this, that when you interpret a text of the Bible, you must know what that text, what that verse, what that book, you must know what that contextual setting is. In other words, a verse can never mean what it did not originally mean. Now, as a teacher of the Word of God and a student of the Bible, I am held to this principle when it comes to reading the Word of God and studying it and teaching it. And that is that if it did not mean it when it was written, then I cannot take license and say it means something different now. If we apply that principle, which is not just a principle, again, unique to the studying of the Bible, it is a principle that is supposed to be applied to studying any text. If we take that principle and apply it to the Constitution and to the Declaration of Independence, if we take that principle, that it can never mean today what it did not mean then we must admit that when the framers wrote the Constitution and said all men are created equal, and at the same time they deduced that we as black people were only 60% human, 3/5 human, and all men are created equal, we were not included. We were not included in the founding documents of this country. We were never included. Slavery was the way of life in the South. And while it was the way of life in the South, the North kept silent. You know, everybody wants to grab a hold of something that Dr. King has said. I want to say this, that we failed to recognize the rightful place of Dr. King in this country and in this world. He was indeed a prophet, not only to America, he was a prophet to the nations. Dr. King, in his skillful, intellectual, spiritual way, said to America that this was going to happen. He identified 3 illnesses that were going to destroy America, and he did this more than 50 years ago. And those 3 illnesses were racism, materialism, and the third one escapes me, militarism. The unnecessary and unlawful use of the military. I say that to say we are looking at that today. Everyone wants to holler and quote the I have a dream speech. But I want to suggest something to you. I want you to go back, and again, I'm talking to us. I want you to read that speech carefully. we all focus on the I have a dream, and we've made it a part of all of our gatherings. But let me tell you what the original name, the title of that speech was Normalcy Never Again. Listen, normalcy never again. Time and America has co-opted that speech and funneled it down to nothing but the I have a dream. But he starts out by saying that America has given us a check that when we went to cash it, it was returned saying insufficient funds, because we were never included. We were never included in the framework and foundation of this country. It was not until from the founding of this country in the 1700s, it was not until 1800s, if you will, 60, that America rolls up in a civil war. The Emancipation Proclamation, signed by a president who wavered on doing so. President Abraham Lincoln said if there were any other way to save the Union, he would have done so. If he could have saved the Union without abolishing slavery, he would have done so. But he found no other way, no other recourse than to issue an Emancipation Proclamation. And an ulterior motive behind that Emancipation Proclamation was to allow African Americans to fight in the Civil War on the side of the North, that they might win. Civil War ended, and immediately following the end of the Civil War, black codes emerged. At the end of the Civil War in 1865, we entered upon a period called Reconstruction. Reconstruction was a time in which the federal government intervened in the places of law in the South to ensure that people of color would have an opportunity and a fair chance. We now hold up that period, those who know of Reconstruction, as being a grand period. But even during that time, a majority of America remained silent. As a matter of fact, black codes replaced slave codes. These black codes basically gave Southern whites the right to incarcerate, the right to arrest, the right to kill black people for any reason. They were slave codes. They were turned to black codes. I say this because we need to review our history, but we need to take a clear look at our history, because we are in this place now because America has never taken a serious effort to include people of color in the fabric of this nation. Reconstruction ends. Let me tell you why Reconstruction ended, and you do the research and do the study. Young people, do the study. Educate yourself. In 1877, there was a loggerhead, a stalemate between the Republican Party, by the way, the party which came into existence to fight slavery. Yes, that was the original purpose of the Republican Party. But there was a stalemate between the Republican Party and the Southern Democrats. Rutherford B. Hayes and the Republican Party made a backroom agreement with the Southern Democrats. And the backroom agreement was this, that the American government will withdraw federal troops from Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana, and the other states where the federal government was there to ensure that the rights of black people were honored. But our Congress entered into a nefarious agreement in order that Rutherford B. Hayes might become the president. And the agreement was that the federal government would pull out of those southern states and return its leadership to the Southern Democrats in exchange for the presidency. When that decision was made, when that agreement was made, Reconstruction ended overnight. Oh, I know the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendments were passed, but America did not hold true, did not believe. It's like, and we've seen it over and over, everyone runs to the aid, everyone decries evil and murder when it's popular. But when the dust settles, we move on. Go back and read the 13th Amendment. It did not give us complete freedom. What the 13th Amendment says is slaves cannot be slaves as long as they don't do something we think is wrong or breaks the law. And that is the law today. Time will not permit me to go into the incarceration and the systemic unfairness that we see in our incarceration. Why our penal system has been privatized because of economic gain, and we are not involved in that economic gain. My brothers and sisters, what we call and what America turns its light on called the civil rights movement, we are taught, and we want to say that it began when Rosa Parks refused to stand in that bus in Montgomery. But I want you to know that civil rights had been going on long before that. Adam Clayton Powell, Thurgood Marshall, W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, A. Philip Randolph, Frederick Douglass, and the list goes on and on. When Dr. King assumed leadership of what was then the Montgomery Improvement Association, which launched this new national civil rights campaign, he called Dr. T.J. Jemison, who was a friend, by the way, of my father. Dr. Jemison had been pastoring in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and it was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that a bus boycott had taken place before the Montgomery boycott. And it was from that boycott that Dr. King and the others got the idea, and from that launched this civil rights movement in 1950. But listen, it was not until 1964, 1965, the Civil Rights Acts and the Voting Rights Act. Mind you, in 1954, before the Montgomery Improvement Association, in 1954, the Supreme Court outlawed segregation in the schools. 10 years later, it had not taken place. 10 years later, segregation was still the standard of the South and of this country. We've never been included in the framework. We have never been a part of the collective thinking of this country. I think about those who gave their lives in the 60s. And here we are again at the same place, And at the same point, here we are again with video that symbolizes the condition of America, and that is that America has always collectively had their knees on the necks of people of color. But I'm thankful as I talk to you. I'm encouraged by the fact that I have seen more of my white brothers and sisters protesting. I've seen more of them saying enough is enough. Because the reality is that we cannot do this, and change cannot be made by us. We don't have the power. We don't have the influence. Oh, there are a few of us scattered in places that have been allowed places of authority by permission. But it is not up to us to make this change. We cannot respond by being violent and being angry, though. Church, we must continue to be the church. We must continue to be believers. We must continue to be disciples. Jesus said, "Why call me Lord, Lord, and do not the things I say?" I say to my brothers and sisters of a lighter hue who call upon Christ, why call him Lord, Lord, and do not the things that he says? I am convinced that the way of Christ is the only way, but it cannot be legislated. Dr. King said something so profound. He said, you cannot legislate a change in the hearts of men, but you can use laws to regulate their behavior. What is needed in this country is not a new law, not a new speech, not a new leader. What we need is a change of heart. A change of heart in my brothers and sisters of a lighter hue, of my white brothers and sisters, a change of heart and a change of action. So what do I say to us? I say, keep praying. I say, don't stop believing. Don't stop trusting God. Do not return evil for evil, but let's overcome evil with good. We've never been a part of the fabric of this country, and so the system must change. The system must change, but the system must change as the hearts of those who have their hands on the system are changed. But I say this as a preacher of the gospel and as a disciple of Jesus Christ. Right will win eventually. Truth will prevail. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Tonight I ask you to, and I caution and I urge you to not become bitter, not become angry. Young people, don't go out and destroy. If you feel the need to protest, yes, protest. But no good is done in the perpetration of violence. Violence only begets violence. Acrimony only begets acrimony. Antipathy only begets antipathy. But if we will stay course, there is a change. It will either be brought about by the converted hearts of our brothers and sisters, or it will be brought about by the justice of God. But let's not lose faith. Let's not lose heart. I encourage you to practice civility, practice love on one another. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, love, respect your husbands. Parents, love your children. Children, let's love our parents. In fact, the command of Jesus is, it's easy to love those who love you. He says, but I say unto you, love, and love is a verb. Love is action. Love your enemy. God bless you tonight.
Thank you for joining us. If this teaching has been a blessing to you, we encourage you to sow a seed online through the Givelify app or visit our website, mtzionanbc.com. Also, feel free to mail your gift to us at Mount Zion All Nations Bible Church, 10575 Krebs Road, DeWitt, Michigan, 48820. Join us for our Sunday services online, corporate prayer, 8:30 a.m. via our conference call, discipleship development, 9 a.m., Zoom conference. Check our website and Facebook page for information. Our Sunday morning broadcast, 10:30 a.m., YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and on our website. And join Yet Ministries starting at 12 noon, Kids Bible Class for ages 3 through 10 from 12 noon to 12:30 p.m. and Youth Bible Class for ages 11 through 17, 12:30 p.m. to 1 p.m. Check our website and Facebook page for Zoom information. We are grateful you chose to join us today for Pastor McClendon's teaching. If you have questions during the week, please call the administrative office at 517-668-2622, Tuesday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And join us this week for our next broadcast. Please remember during this time to be safe, be well, and be blessed.